The Gina Haspel nomination is coming down to the wire, and we're joined here by Yasmine Taeb of the Center for Victims of Torture, who has been on the Hill a ton, lobbying against this nomination, talking to Senate offices, senators of both sides of the aisle, because Democrats aren't the only ones who might oppose her. Wanted you to just give us an update on the status of where this is and how this fight might still be won.
So, as you know, Gina Haspel's confirmation hearing took place on Wednesday, and her hearing, what it really did for us is it confirmed everything that we already knew, right? That Ms. Haspel had a role in brutal torture and its cover-up. As you know, Ryan, she, on multiple occasions throughout the hearing, failed and refused to acknowledge the immorality of torture. She took no responsibility for her actions. She felt as though these enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, was effective. It really, I think, was a great opportunity for the American people, for our senators and their staff to get a better idea of who Ms. Haspel is, because, yeah, go ahead.
Now, it seemed at one point that she acknowledged that she had actually argued for continuing torture, which is, so there are several layers going on here. One is, I was against it, but I was just following orders. That's not an excuse, but it's here. Then the other is, I advocated for this internally as the best way forward, and it seemed to me that that's where she sat. Was that your reading too?
It definitely was, and that's something that we've been trying to highlight with senators and their staff, is that that's the impression that we also got from her hearing, is that she was a supporter of the program. And as you know, that, credibly reported that she had lobbied very aggressively for the destruction of the videotapes.
Right. That was the other thing, but people have said, Ron Johnson and others said, well, it was lawful and she was authorized to destroy the videotapes, which again is not an excuse. And if it were an excuse, you'd have to empty the prisons of every getaway driver, every gang member, everybody convicted of any RICO crime, because you could only arrest the absolute person at the top, and then everybody in the criminal organization below would get off scot-free. But that doesn't seem to be what she's saying, and that might explain why she couldn't say it was immoral.
I mean, someone in her position, and she's been in senior managerial roles at the agency. Anyone in that position is aware of the Federal Records Act, and that you are not allowed to destroy documents and federal records. So, I mean, throughout her hearing, she kept talking about how, her main concern with those videotapes was that if it were to get leaked, she was incredibly concerned about, the safety of CIA agents and her colleagues. I mean, she knows, first of all, about the law, about not destroying records, and also there are other ways to ensure the protection and safety of her colleagues without having to destroy the evidence.
Okay, so John McCain will not be voting.
That's correct.
But he's opposed, right? Rand Paul, how in the bank do you think his no vote is?
We're pretty confident that he is going to be opposing Ms. Haspel's confirmation. He's made it very clear. He again has reiterated multiple times in the last several days that he's not going to be supporting her. And you brought up Senator McCain's statement. I mean, that was an incredibly powerful statement that he put out, the night of her hearing. And shortly after that statement went out is when myself and some of my colleagues, we started hearing from additional Republican offices, because his colleagues in the Senate listen to him. They
Right.
know that this is an issue that McCain knows more about. There's no one in the Senate that knows more
Right.
about this issue than him, right?
So those two no votes take you from They have 51 members. That takes them down to 49. They need 50 to pass it. So they've got Joe Manchin, who's publicly for it. So that takes them back up to 50. To get under 50, they'd have to lose some other Republicans and lose every Democrat.
Correct.
We can get to the Democrats in a second. Mike Lee is often talked about as one of the renegade Republicans who, marches to the beat of his own drummer. Today being what it is, he still votes with the party 95% of the time. What's your read on his office, and what other Republicans should people be thinking about in play here?
Sure. So I think you're correct that Senator Lee is a good office to focus on when it comes to issues of civil liberties, torture. These are issues that he does care about, and we've been in touch with their office, making sure that their boss has the information he needs to be able to make an informed decision about Ms. Haspel's nomination. In addition to Senator Lee, as I'm sure you've seen some of the statements from Senator Flake, he also put in a request to the Attorney General to get the full Durham report. And this is the report, the investigation that was done during the destruction of the videotapes. We've also been in touch with Senator Flake's office, Senator Daines, there's a couple of others, but this definitely should not. I know that it appears as though it's becoming a partisan issue. Torture is not a partisan issue, right? And it's unfortunate that when we're talking about this nomination and this political climate, that the White House is talking about how Democrats are just opposing Ms. Haspel's nomination because she's a nominee of a Republican administration. That's not true.
Right. They've approved a lot of nominees.
So.
Yes. Okay. So then on the Democratic side, you've got your usual suspects that people worry about on every bill, every nominee. People like Mark Warner, John Tester, Joe Donnelly, Heidi Heitkamp, Claire McCaskill. How hopeful are you that they're getting enough pressure and that they are going to rally and vote against torture, a torturer?
So, we're pretty hopeful that they are going to be opposing her confirmation. From what we understand, all of these offices that you just mentioned, they are. And
did I miss any that are key?
Donnelly, McCaskill. I think you covered them. Yeah. These are all the offices that are key targets, not just for the Center for Victims of Torture, Indivisible, Move On, Human Rights First, right? There's a series of organizations that are working with us in terms of opposing this nomination. And there are thousands and thousands of folks that are calling into these offices, sending letters. And I think that it's so incredibly important that folks continue to do that, especially with the red state Dems, letting them know, even if it's an election year for them, letting them know that this is an issue that the base cares about, and they absolutely need to unequivocally send a message that the U.S. does not support torture, that our senators are not going to be supporting and confirming a torturer.
The conventional wisdom out there might be that, okay, well, this state voted for Trump, people there must love torture. But when you look at the politics of it, the morality of it aside, is that true? Would somebody like a John Tester, Claire McCaskill, would they face repercussions on the issue of torture? Now, there might be repercussions for voting against Trump for people who love Trump. Set that aside. Torture itself, when you go around Montana or you go around Missouri, where do people stand on the issue of whether or not the U.S. should be torturing people?
This is an issue that should be a no-brainer, right? That this is not, if Claire McCaskill, Joe Donnelly, Heidi Heitkamp, if they end up voting no on Ms. Haspel's confirmation, this is not going to be a vote that is going to, hurt them in terms of support for them. This is a no-brainer. Americans know that we need to send a strong message, again, to our allies, to our enemies, to this president who has openly embraced torture, letting them know that we don't, that this chapter has been closed and that we are not going to reopen it. So, and again, you mentioned Virginia. Virginia, as a Virginian, I'd like to think that, we're becoming more progressive. And Tim Kaine is running this year. My senator, he's a fantastic senator. He came out today against Ms. Haspel's nomination.
From Lee Allen Meyer, Senator Burr, other Republicans, and Haspel talked a lot of 9/11 and the actions taken shortly thereafter. Why was there no mention of how much of a failure that program was, considering increase in extremist terror attacks and wars?
We've been talking about how this program has not been effective, right? That it's in fact been hurting us. We've had over 100 ambassadors this week write to the Senate, telling senators to oppose her. Over 100 military leaders also conveying the same sentiments. So we've continued to talk about it and message it this way, and hopefully we'll keep doing it.
And then the torture report itself concluded that it was completely ineffective, which that's beside the point.